Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, how do you read that statement from Salman Khurshid when he says that this is a setback to India-Pakistan ties? Do you see the dialogue process being affected?
Unfortunately, Suhasini, these episodes are part of a long string of tit-for-tat violence and blood sport that our two countries have been playing, especially among the intelligence agencies. So it does look like it will hurt the ties, because it will become part of the memory of injury and angst and agony on our side of the border. Remember, there are nearly 800 prisoners that we claim are being held in Pakistani jails, and they have quite a few number on our side as well. Lots of fisher folk especially, but also some agents. Sarabjit becomes tragic, especially because we will never know the truth. Was he a hot potato who was dropped by our agencies after he became dispensable and got caught? Was he actually just framed by the Pakistani agencies after those blasts in 1990, the long time in death row? I think he became, in many ways, a metaphor for the relationship as a whole, which has been full of pain and anguish since partition, and continues to be one where human beings have become pawns in larger geopolitical games. So the relationship will, I think, it will survive the blow of Sarabjit, but it's a human tragedy, first of all. And I think the way his sister has been advocating for his cause for so long in a very emotional manner is going to add to the hurt feelings on our side of the border. But I do hope that this can become a trigger for us to deal with the bilateral problem of massive numbers of prisoners, many of whom are indefinitely under detention or facing death row or extradition, but who never know what happens to their fates. This is like our own, Guantanamo Bay magnified many times over.
Sreeram Chaulia, you heard earlier the BJP and other members of the opposition making very clear demands. Firstly, they're asking for the relations with Pakistan to be downgraded until they see some action from Pakistan in this particular case, and of course in others also talking about recalling high commissioners. Is that something that's realistic? Do you think that the government is proposing at all any kind of diplomatic measures over this case?
Well, Suhasini, certainly this is not as outrageous as a terrorist attack, which leads to lots of loss of civilians on our soil. And as I said before, there is a bit of a nebulous category involving Sarabjit, and we must be cognizant of the fact that these border districts from which he came, Tarn Taran, Ferozepur, Gurdaspur, Amritsar, they have always had these landless poor peasants willing to trade their desperation to work for our agencies, to get some information across the border, and to engage in spying. And trading of spies is certainly one practical measure, I think, that must be considered. The Israelis have done them with the Palestinians often. Trading of prisoners on a case-by-case basis, you do swaps, and I think that's a practical thing. I believe there's some judicial commission working on these kind of issues between our two countries, and that must be strengthened and fast-forwarded. Diplomatically, I mean, the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, is supposed to have a mandate over the treatment of prisoners wherever they are held, and certainly Sarabjit's treatment merited greater inspection, but I believe the Pakistani authorities had actually walled off anybody from visiting and seeing his conditions towards the end of his life. So it's really tragic, because what it means is that if it was an accidental attack, then it means that there was not enough security, but the point is that he was in very, very high security and in isolation for a while. So certainly this looked like it was pre-planned, was premeditated murder. So to that point, I agree with what these opposition parties in our country are saying, but then the response, we must be thinking about a practical means, because there are also Pakistani prisoners in our custody, and certainly this is not a case where there was an assault on Indian civilians who have no connection to any agencies on our soil. So I think we should not jump the gun and let the tempers cool. In a few days' time, you will realize that we need a pragmatic solution, and I think the prisoner swap is certainly one thing that must be considered. It's not a legal solution. It's a lot better. Let people come back and let people go from here on the other side. Those who deserve to go and who are reasonably safe to be sent back without any suspicion of them being returning to their agencies and redoing what they were initially alleged to have done. So I think we need to look at this. This is certainly the easiest approach. It's not like Siachen. Sure. It's certainly not LOC. This is just the Punjab border, which is already recognized by both sides as an international border, and we should try and normalize the relationship and demilitarize it and reduce some of the intrigue and espionage that's been going on in this
right,
border.
And certainly perhaps civilize it. Praveen Swami, Dr. Chaulia seems to be indicating quite directly that Sarabjit Singh may have in fact been the spy that he was accused of in Pakistan, in which case has India been guilty of failing to acknowledge and owning Sarabjit? And I would like to ask you, Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, the fact is that all of this has played out in the last 4 months when India and Pakistan have really had no ties or talks between the two countries, particularly after that incident of the beheading at the line of control. What hope really is there that this peace process or dialogue process between the two countries that has now frayed so far and seems to have only gotten worse can actually be picked up post-elections next month?
I am hopeful, Suhasini, because if there is a Nawaz Sharif-led government, even if it's a coalition government, he has been very pragmatic in the past and continues to think on those lines. Although he has sympathies for Islamist and right-wing groups, which you yourself follow very much within Pakistan, when it comes to India, Nawaz Sharif has been much more reasonable. And I think with our own regime transition coming up in the next several months, we should look forward to political change that is pragmatic and that's looking forward. But of course, not forgetting all these really harrowing tragedies that are in many ways eating into the souls of our two nations and making us feel as if this is some kind of eternal war from which we can never emerge. So it's very important that we must hold on to hope while at the same time seeking accountability for what is clearly a deprivation of a person's political and civil rights in a prison in this condition.
And that's the other side of that human tragedy, Dr. Chaulia. The families that we are looking at, and in particular Sarabjit Singh's family, that has had to live with this situation, knowing that their loved ones are languishing in prison, sometimes being threatened, sometimes being assaulted, and really very helpless because of the nature of the India-Pakistan relationship itself. Today we heard from Prime Minister Manmohan Singh on Sarabjit Singh, and he made that statement that Sarabjit Singh was a brave son of India. Was there an indication there that the Indian government is finally prepared to own and acknowledge Sarabjit Singh and others like that as people who had gone out with a mission from the government?
So, Hasni, agencies around the world, security agencies, tend to not to own up for those who get caught because it has embarrassment, it blows the cover of the plausible deniability upon which covert agencies often operate. So if at all we are rehabilitating him, we will only do it in a very cryptic manner. So he was, of course, a son of India, irrespective of whether he served our national security apparatus or not. But if we are acknowledging it, well and good, at least posthumously, he's getting some recognition. But if you look at agencies around the world, they are very, very cautious on these acknowledgement business because they are in the whole trade of denying whatever they do. And I think we'll need to probe deeper because at the end of the day, if somebody signs up, enlists to serve for our country in any manner possible, I don't believe that he had actually carried out those attacks, but it is quite plausible that he had gone to trade information and to just as for spying. And so, in that case, what is the incentive for these people in the long run in terms of safety and security? So, at a level, it's a humanitarian issue. At another level, it's about our intelligence community, which is quite opaque, and which will need to also draw up new means by which it treats its so-called assets and its agents better in the field. The Israelis, the Israelis are now debating with the Americans about this guy called Pollard, who has been in US jail for a long time and who the Israelis initially had disowned, but later on, due to a groundswell of public opinion from within home, eventually took him back into their fold and are now advocating for his release with President Obama. So that's still not a done deal. There are many such cases. We will have to unblock the black box surrounding covert operations and think about human beings at the end of the day and how to save these lives, because
Sure.
at the end of the day they are not just cogs in a machine. Even if they're served up, we need to own them and give them some respect, at least after their death.
Of course, I'd like to thank Sreeram Chaulia, who was also here to really